Hello, it is Sunday, Fun Day, July 14th, 2019. Steve Sipress here, and I was contacted by a whole bunch of old friends and family about yesterday, a blackout occurring in New York City. Now, it was a small one and a short one, and I haven't checked or looked on the news, but I'm guessing there likely wasn't much looting and violence and all that kind of stuff just because of the location. It happened kind of in Midtown and the Upper West Side, which are heavily policed areas, nice areas, affluent, that kind of stuff. But it brought back memories. Now, the first New York City blackout, when I was just a kid, we had just moved just outside of the city into the suburbs, and so we weren't personally affected, but I do remember hearing about it. And I remember as we went out and looked outside of New York City at the darkness, it was a crazy sight to see. But the next one, the summer of 1977, amazingly on the same date, I couldn't forget it because it was July 13th, 1977. I don't remember what day of the week it was specifically, but I know it was a weekday, not a weekend. And I was working in Madison Square Garden. I was in the summer, and World Team Tennis was the event that night. And World Team Tennis did not get a big attendance, big enough for the most part to be held in the actual Madison Square Garden. It was held downstairs in what was known as the Felt Forum, named after a donor who donated funds to build the thing. And so they held minor events down there, like Golden Gloves boxing and some kind of Sesame Street shows, things like that, and World Team Tennis for the most part. They set it up down there. And it's an arena that it's still there. It seats around 4,500 or so. So it's not a small thing by any stretch, but compared to Madison Square Garden, it seats over 19,000. It's the minor venue. And I remember that there's only one kitchen, only one headquarters for the vendors. I was a food vendor walking around the seats in Madison Square Garden in one of my high school jobs. My favorite one, the most fun one. Will is here, great seeing you. And, we had to go Felt Forum was so inconvenient. We almost never worked those events. I mean, we had to go all the way upstairs and get stuff and go back down. What we usually did was we worked the Felt Forum when there was another event going on. So when there was an event upstairs, a Knicks game, a Ranger game, a concert, a wrestling match, they were live in there once a month. World Cup every 4 years was on the big screen TVs in there. Whenever there was the circus certainly was in there for 160 something shows every year, 10, 12 weeks straight. That's usually when we would work the Felt Forum. It was like manager would pick a few of us and say, hey, take some stuff down to the Felt Forum and work down there. And we were like, oh, bummer. I'm working up here in the main event, but, that's what we did. He didn't send down the bottom people. There's a little lesson for you in management. You don't send your bottom-dwelling sales performers to go do something new or test something or do something extra. You send the top performers to do it, and sure enough, we were able to be at the top in sales at the main event and cash in some extra bucks from the downstairs event at the same time. We just worked a little harder, and the manager knew that, even though we didn't. We complained about it. But I do remember I was in the Felt Forum when the lights went out. Now, when the lights went out, it was World Team Tennis, which, by the way, by then they were called the New York Apples. I almost said the New York Sets, because World Team Tennis in those days, I think it's back again, but it was only around for a few years in the mid-'70s. And they started out as the New York Sets, because, of course, you had the New York Mets, the New York Nets, the New York Jets. They named it the New York Sets for tennis. And then they were like, that's a ridiculous name. And they had some kind of contest, and the fans came up with the New York Apples. And for the last couple of years there, before the league disbanded, they were the New York Apples 2 years, I believe, 76 and 77, if I get that right. And the stars of 77, if I remember, of course, Billie Jean King was on the team. I think she was also the coach. And Tom Ocker was the big shot man on the team, I believe. Sandy Mayer was also, I think he'd been a big star the year before. But anyway, I mean, it's just amazing, by the way, to watch these pros warm up. They do things in warm-ups, like in all the sports, like the home run derby. You watch these guys hit 40 home runs, in 5 minutes, where they don't hit 40 home runs the whole year. And you see them make ridiculous throws from the outfield and, catch balls behind the back and whatever in practice. Same in basketball. When you watch the All-Star game, they're throwing the ball behind the back, through the legs, throw it off the backboard, no look, boom, bang, whatever. That's what World Team Tennis was. We would watch the warm-ups, and I just remember watching Tom Ocker, top man, not by any stretch, not the top man in the world, but as John McEnroe famously said a few years ago, and people, of course, took it like an insult. It's like this women's soccer team now. They take it like an insult. They don't get the same pay as the men in the World Cup. Like the Women's World Cup brings in like 1/10 the revenue of the Men's World Cup. I don't even think, not even. And as far as the ability, it's not even one of those, not even a superstar on the team could even sit on the bench for any men's team, other than maybe the worst men's team in the world. But of course, it's not about the quality of the play and the skill. It's about the bucks. It's business. It's about the money. It's about how many people buy souvenirs, how many people watch the games, all the attention that's given to it. And unfortunately for the women right now, the Men's World Cup dwarfs the Women's World Cup. So I know they want equal pay and all that BS, but this isn't some Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, you didn't build that la-la world. This is reality where money talks and the numbers matter. And so, of course, they don't deserve equal pay with the men. And similarly, their skill is like not even in the same hemisphere as the men. I remember Tom Ocker would warm up. He's one of the top, probably one of the top 20 men at the time. But he would warm up on one side of the court, and there would be 2 top women on the other side of the court warming up with him, and he would cover the doubles portion of the court. For anyone that knows tennis, when you play doubles, the court is, I think, 6 feet wider. Like there's 3 feet on each side. And he would cover the whole court on one side. And, of course, they would cover the whole court on the other side, and it would be a fair match. I mean, he would be smashing the ball, and they'd make him run from side to side. Didn't matter. He ran from side to side. And that was one thing they do in the warm-up. To get a real good warm-up in, he would warm up again 1 against 2. Now, if it was 1 against 2 men, he'd have no chance. But 1 against 2 women, it was fun to watch. And then he would do things, all the players would do things like hit it behind the back and hit overheads like blindfolded. They play lefty and still smash the ball. He'd like hit it, serve it off the side of the racket, and it would still go 80 miles an hour across the net. They do amazing things in the warm, so it's fun to watch. But I remember when the lights went out, and it was strange. All the lights, however, didn't go out. I mean, by its nature, the Feld Forum is kind of in the basement. It's not technically in the basement of the garden. It's in on the first or second floor. And the main garden, by the way, the floor is on the 5th floor. If you don't know, the garden is like a 9-floor building, and the main floor is like on the 5th floor. And our lot, or the 3rd floor, I think. It was on the 3rd floor, and so were the locker rooms. But anyway, we would go down to the Feld Forum, and there's no outside windows or anything like that. And so they had emergency lights came on. So it's not like it was pitch dark, but suddenly the lights went off, and a few sparse emergency lights came on, and everyone was like, what the heck is going on? And I remember later reading that what had happened was, there's no internet in those days, so we read in the paper the next day. There was no 24-hour news channels. It was there wasn't this unhinged craziness that you have today, just because news was a couple of times a day, 6 p.m., 11 p.m., that was it. You got a newspaper in the morning, and maybe an afternoon edition, but you didn't go crazy and bonkers because of Twitter and Facebook and 24-hour news channels that just got to fill the air with hype and fear and all kinds of craziness going on. So we read about the cause of the blackout was lightning strikes. There was a couple of different lightning strikes in different areas, and when they hit Like the transformers overloaded the other areas and the whole thing went off all throughout the city. And a problem was they kept trying to turn it on too soon. And so they tried to turn it on in like the first like 20 minutes or half an hour. I remember the lights went on and everyone cheered, oh, the lights, because everyone's waiting, thinking, this won't last long. And the lights went on, and then in like 30 seconds they went off again because they overloaded all the circuits, putting everything on at once. And that happened a couple of times. And then it was like, that's it. And they just made an announcement, everyone go home. And meanwhile, everyone couldn't go home because cars were parked in garages. And in New York, probably in lots of big cities, but the garages have vertical elevators holding all the cars up. Even the outdoor garages are known to have cars going 4 or 5 cars up in the air. You see that a lot in marinas too with boats. In the winter they put the boats like 4 or 5 high on a lift. Well, that's how it is with cars in New York, and so they couldn't get the cars down off the lifts, couldn't go home. Also, people that lived in New York, a lot of those buildings you cannot open the windows. For safety reasons, you can't anything above however many floors. The windows just do not open, so nobody has any chance of opening them up and by mistake falling out, or a cat falling out, or a baby, or anything like that. So without air conditioning, it's just unlivable. So the whole thing was craziness. And I remember I lived in New Jersey at the time with my dad, and all I had to do was get my car and carefully drive through the city where there were no lights and there's craziness going on. And in 1977, when this happened, by the way, for those of you from New York, you might remember, that was the most violent, crazy summer in New York history. And so it was extra craziness because of this blackout. That was the summer of a serial killer on the loose for pretty much the whole summer, named David Berkowitz, who was known as Son of Sam. And they've made movies and TV shows about it and whatever. This guy was terrorizing the city and murdering like 40 or 50 people, mostly young women. But if there happened to be a guy in the car seat next to her, he would kill both of them, of course. And so all summer, people that were going out, it was like, oh, go out in packs, especially women. Like, do not walk down the street alone, walk with 4, 5, 6, but even guys, we didn't know what was going on. So all we knew was there's a killer out there all over, and he was all over the city, seemingly. That's why they didn't catch him until he killed like 40, 50 people or whatever. He was seemingly randomly all over the city killing people. So that was a crazy scene, and we just kept thinking in the dark, with everything off, and the cops all, whatever the word is, they were all concentrating elsewhere. This would be time for criminals to run wild, which they did. Looting was massive. If you can find it somewhere on the internet and read about this thing. Unbelievable burning and looting, like 1 or 2 mile stretches in bad areas of the city, like Bed-Stuy or Hell's Kitchen or Harlem. Like, they were just burning whole blocks, and like dozens of businesses being looted and burnt. And I remember the story about one car dealership where they robbed like 50 cars from the car dealership, but the whole city was up in flames. It was anarchy. It was a nightmare. It was craziness. So I was, in a little trepidation, a little fear, a little hesitation of like even getting out of there. I remember hanging out for a while with the staff, guys that lived in the city, so they knew their car was in a garage that they couldn't get it out. And they were like, well, refrigerators are out, all the food's going bad, so start eating. So we were like eating ice cream, and they were drinking beer, and they're like, beer's gonna go flat, ice cream's gonna melt, like, might as well have a party. And we just like played cards and hung out and ate and drank. And I was slightly underage at 17, so I wasn't drinking beer. But I was hanging out and having a blast with these guys, and we're wondering, and everyone thought, as always, it's going to end any minute now. Patricia's here, good seeing you. And it didn't. I don't think the lights came back on until the next morning or something. So eventually I was like, all right, I'll get out there. And luckily it's only a few blocks from where I usually parked, around 9th or 10th, till I can get into the Lincoln Tunnel and get to New Jersey. And get to where there were lights. And there were lights on in the tunnel because they're emergency lights, but no traffic lights, and people, just wildness all over the place. And so it was interesting, to say the least. Now, about that summer of '77, that violent, crazy summer, burning out all of the South Bronx and murders and at a height, an all-time high, and crime at an all-time high in the city. I remember I graduated high school the next year and scramoosed out of New York and went up to Boston, where I lived for about 17 years or so. I remember later on, I made a beeline for an event when I saw that Curtis Sliwa was going to be speaking at it. It's when I was living in Chicago, only about 15 years ago. He was the founder of the Guardian Angels in New York City. This is a group of vigilante volunteers that would wear their berets, their whatever they're called, kind of hats, and they would be trained in martial arts and self-defense and defense of others and whatever, but they were never armed, and they would ride the subways and walk the streets and protect average citizens. That's what they were known to do, the Guardian Angels. Curtis Sliwa and his wife at the time, they later divorced, but they founded the thing. And I remember when I saw that he was speaking at this event in Chicago, I made a beeline. I've done that a lot of times. That happened to be in the city I was living in. But I've gotten on planes and paid for plane and hotel and admission and food and all the costs just to get to an event to meet one person. Another business lesson there. I highly recommend you do. There's a reason I became one of the most, and still am one of the most well-connected people in the entrepreneur field. And this case was no exception. I went to meet Curtis Sliwa because I just had to tell him. He gave his talk about the summer of '77, founding the Guardian Angels, and how crazy it was. And I just had to go up and congratulate him for the guts to stay there in New York and to say, my city is burning and I'm going to be a part of the problem. Well, I tucked tail between my legs and ran away. I said, hey, I ain't dealing with this. I'm out of here. And I left New York and went to Boston. I told him that. And I said, I just got to commend you. And there's another lesson there. And I've remembered that for years. Like, you have a choice. In business, there's always ups and downs, just like in cities. There's ups and downs. I know right now you're thinking that American cities they're certainly on a downswing, many of them. Big homeless problems and big unemployment problems and crime problems and all kinds of stuff going on, and certainly financial problems. Chicago that I mentioned, Detroit, cities that have way too many unfunded pension promises that they made to city workers. They're on the verge of bankruptcy, happening all over the country, or all the big homeless stuff happening on the West Coast where the weather's nice. But, things go through ups and downs. And so when things were down in New York, I scramoosed. When things are down in your business, you have a choice. You can do like I did when I was a teenager in New York and say, I'm out of here, this thing sucks, and go find something else to do. Or set up the same business in another physical location, find somewhere else to go. Either way. Or you can do like Curtis Sliwa did and said, okay, this is my city. In your case, you'd say, this is my business, and I'm going to stick it out, and I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to fight this downturn, and I'm going to make it happen. So now I've done that in business. I've also not fought and lost businesses, including my first multi-million-dollar business, my fantasy sports game company that I built to the largest in the industry, and then a couple of tough things happened, and a baseball strike, and a lockout, and big cash flow problems, and I gave up, just like I'd given up when summer '77 was just crazy in New York with the Son of Sam, the blackout, all the looting and murders and all kinds of stuff going on. But it's always a choice. You have a choice. You can flee and leave. You can give up and go do something else. Certainly that's commendable, by the way. There's a saying, the easiest way to complete a project is to just cancel it. There. Now it's no longer unfinished. Just, that was an interesting idea, but I'm not doing it anymore. Move on. This whole persistence thing is way overrated. Like, persisting in the wrong thing is a big mistake. Or you can be part of the solution and stick it out. And that's going to be tough. That's a much tougher road. but there are big rewards. So for Curtis Lewa, it wasn't like lots of money. He wasn't getting paid. It was a whole volunteer thing. But he then, wrote books and had documentaries done. And hopefully, if he knows someone like me that knows how to cash in on someone's personal story, he cashed in on it and made a lot of money from it. The founding of the Guardian Angels and that whole summer of 77 and 78 and those tough times in New York. So I'm remembering that now when I saw that blackout yesterday. Only lasted a few hours in a nice area, so it wasn't anything like 77. But I don't know if they've made movies about 77 blackout, but holy moly, it was a war zone in New York City, especially that night. Incredible burning, looting, crime, destruction, just no respect for anything, opportunity-minded criminals, non-criminals turning into criminals because the opportunity presented itself, and totally crazy. So that's my memories here today, one day after the 42nd anniversary of the blackout in New York City, July 13th, 1977. Then we had another one, July 13th, 2019. Who knew? That'll do it for Sunday Fun Day. I don't see any questions, comments, concerns other than people saying hello. Thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed your Sunday as well as another spectacularly beautiful day. By the way, monsoon season here in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area has officially been on for weeks, and it hasn't rained at all yet. So just like I just talked about, we know the storm is coming. So a lot of people, it's pretty appropriate, a lot of people do not stay here for the summer. They head up north to visit friends, family, to do whatever. I just was talking with a client who started a business up north in the state of Washington, just so that she can be up there pretty much for the summer and come back down here for the winter. A lot of entrepreneurs do that. I've done that in the past. I highly recommend it. It's very smart, strategically set up businesses and locations that are up north for the summers and in warmer, or here, hotter climates for the winter. And so there you go. There's that choice you have. You can say, I'm not hanging out where it's going to be 115 degrees every day for a few weeks and monsoon flooding rains coming in every night. I'm going to scramoose out of there and be a snowbird. I'll come down for the winter and I'll head back up for the summer. So we're not doing that. We're here, other than traveling to events that I host or speak at or attend. But the rains have not begun yet. The heat has, not yet the rain. And Patricia said hello and now says good night. Good night to you as well, or buenas noches to people that speak multiple languages. That's almost the extent of my Spanish. It took 7 years of Spanish through middle school, high school, and college. And don't speak it very well, but I can watch and understand movies in Spanish and TV shows, and I can even read, but I never spoke it a lot. Oh, and now Patricia's speaking English and says, yeah, I'm so glad I haven't woken up to my patio furniture in the pool. Exactly. We're up here in the mountains where we got extra wind, and I'm like, it's kind of breezy and windy even on normal days. I'm like, we got to remember to take down all these umbrellas and move everything inside. Even the iron furniture gets tossed around like toothpicks in the monsoon season, especially. I'm sure for us it's going to be our first monsoon season up here in the mountains, and I'm sure it's going to be fun and crazy. See, now there's the attitude. When tough times hit and craziness happens, you can look at it as, oh my goodness, it's going to be terrible, or you can say, this is going to be interesting, and let's see what happens. I had the former viewpoint with my teenage years in New York City. I was like, I'm out of here. Others said, okay, like Curtis Lewa said, okay, this is kind of crazy. Let's do something new. Let's start a whole new thing and be guardian angels with no weapons and take our life into our hands and ride the subway with people with knives and guns all over the place and walk the streets of Harlem with no weapons. And he's still around, so he made it. So he said, I'm up for the adventure. What about you and your business? When tough times hit, do you sit there and lament and cry and moan how tough it is? Or do you say, you know what, this is the adventure that I went in for when I said I'm going to own my own business? You have more freedoms than 90% of people You call your own shots. You're in charge of all your own destiny. I know there's always restrictions and laws and this and that and whatever, but man, we have it made. It's just an adventure. It's not a steady paycheck as if there is anything. I mean, those days are gone, aren't they? Of like, you're with one company for 40 years and you get a golden watch and you retire. Those days really happen, so we don't have it. 9-to-5 workers have it a little crazy too, so you might as well have all the advantages of having your own business as well. And if you want help with that, starting, growing, expanding, that's especially fun for me, scaling and exploding a business, go to helpfromsteve.com. We'll get on the phone and I'll help you do it. Have a lot of fun doing it, have a lot of ways to do it. We'll have fun, we'll make money. And that's it for Sunday Fun Day. Probably my longest Sunday Fun Day video of all time in the 2.25 years I've been doing a Facebook Live video every single day. Speaking of which, God willing, I'll be back tomorrow on Direct Mail Monday, and I hope you will join me then. Thank you, Patricia, and everyone else watching live, everyone on the replay. Catch you tomorrow. Bye-bye.